This is a dusky gopher frog. They can only be found in Mississippi, where there are just 200 adults left in the wild. The frog might not be as majestic as a polar bear or as cute as a sea otter, but this year, it's a poster child in the debate over endangered species. That's because on October 1st, the frog is starring in a case before the U.S. Supreme Court. The lawsuit pits the private property rights of one of the world's biggest timber companies against the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's efforts to protect the frog. Here's why the frog is in so much trouble. The gopher frog used to live in Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Now, there are only 6 ponds in the world where the species is known to breed.
So we're looking for tadpoles. Even if I get one, that's a good sign.
Disease and drought are partly to blame, but it's mostly humans' fault.
The gopher frog needs a very specific habitat. It's a really beautiful habitat type. So of course, us being people are like, this is gorgeous and really scenic. I'm gonna put my house here, or I'm gonna turn this into a plantation.
Biologists work day and night to preserve the species, starting with raising frogs from tadpoles in tanks. In the 17 years since the frog was listed as endangered, conservation efforts have almost doubled the tiny population, from 100 adults to 200.
Oh, this is 43A. I know. Life's hard. It is perfectly valid to ask why we should bother with the dusky gopher frog because their population is so low anyway. The habitat that we're creating and trying to preserve for the dusky gopher frog allows us to benefit a wide variety of animals. It's just irresponsible not to try and fix the messes that we've created for ourselves.
Every night, the group spends hours checking traps, hoping for evidence that the population is growing on its own.
Got anything?
Mostly, they find common frogs. Due to a mix of disease and weather conditions, they've found only 2 new wild gopher frogs this year, and they didn't find any last year.
I'm very sad. This is a bummer. It's disappointing, but it's also a critically endangered species. And they do go through cyclical downturns. You cannot take it personally, and I don't, but it is disappointing.
The scientists work with the U.S. Forest Service to build or modify ponds for the frogs. They keep their locations under wraps.
Location services, and you turn them off. We don't want anyone who, even with the best intentions, would come out here hoping to find a gopher frog, but accidentally stepping on one, or unintentionally harming them, or bringing in some sort of disease on their shoes. It's a biosecurity issue.
Scientists want to reintroduce the frogs in Louisiana, but their ideal habitat is 1,500 acres of land that's privately owned, partly by Weyerhaeuser. The area has rare ponds that could be great for the frogs, but only with major changes. So in 2012, Fish and Wildlife designated that land as critical habitat in hopes that the frogs would eventually be moved there. The government estimated the designation could cost the landowners up to $34 million in lost development. So Weyerhaeuser sued, saying the U.S. can't protect private land that would need to be changed so drastically for an endangered species. The frog does not live there, cannot live there, and will not live there in the future, the company said. A win for Weyerhaeuser could really restrict the kind of land that can be designated for endangered species. But experts say animals will need even more protected land as climate change alters their natural habitats. The Trump administration raised the stakes in July when it proposed rolling back protections in the Endangered Species Act. Now, the Supreme Court could set a precedent that would make it easier to overhaul parts of the act. And the court could make it much harder for the frog to ever get back to Louisiana.
If the Supreme Court case doesn't rule in our favor, then that will add yet another restriction to an already very restricted system.
Once the homegrown frogs are measured and tagged, they're released into the wild. The population would need to grow to at least a few thousand frogs to be downgraded from endangered to threatened. With or without the Supreme Court's backing, it's a process that will take many years.
In the next 20, maybe we'll have 400 breeding adults if we keep going the way we are.